Welcome back to the Heal Your Hormones podcast. We have reached the final episode for the cycle syncing series this month. And before we cover the last phase of the menstrual cycle, I wanted to remind you that this is the last week to be entered to win our April giveaway. All you need to do is leave a review for the podcast and share the podcast on Instagram and tag me, and I'll be choosing the winner at the beginning of May. So let's get into the fourth and final phase of the menstrual cycle, and that is the luteal phase. Now, the luteal phase really is the most important phase when it comes to staying pregnant. Of course, the ovulatory phase is the most important for getting pregnant because we need the egg to be released from the ovary in order for a pregnancy to take place. But the luteal phase is really what sets the tone for a healthy pregnancy. So remember, after ovulation, there is a sac of tissue in the ovary called the corpus luteum, and this starts to make progesterone after the egg is released. So typically progesterone is made for 12 to 4 days, and then one of two things happens. So first is a pregnancy does not take place. There is no communication really happening between the uterus and the ovaries. So the ovaries know after a while, it's time to stop making progesterone. This drop in progesterone is going to trigger the lining of our uterus to start to break down, and that's when we get our period. Now, alternatively, if a pregnancy does take place, the ovaries are going to sense that change, and the ovaries will continue to make progesterone to prevent the lining of the uterus from being broken down. Because if it breaks down, we're going to lose the pregnancy, right? The lining of the uterus is where the embryo attaches. So if that lining starts to break off from the lining of the uterus, then we're going to lose the embryo that once implanted. So you can see how if you get pregnant and progesterone levels drop too quickly, then you can lose the pregnancy, which is why low progesterone levels are a very common cause of miscarriage early on in pregnancy. Now, progesterone is not just important for pregnancy. It's also really important for supporting mood. So if progesterone levels drop too quickly or too soon in the luteal phase, we can experience worse PMS or something called PMDD, which is essentially really severe mood shifts during that PMS time period. Really, progesterone is the star of the show during the luteal phase, and our focus during this time needs to be put towards supporting progesterone levels to improve fertility and reduce PMS symptoms. Now, at the beginning of the luteal phase, so just shortly after ovulation, hormones are still going to be high, and you're going to have high energy as a result. However, once hormone levels, including estrogen and progesterone, start to drop, you're going to start to feel tired, maybe less motivated, less social. So if your hormones are dropping earlier in your luteal phase, you may experience PMS symptoms for 1 to 2 weeks before your period, compared to women whose hormones drop later in their luteal phase who don't really have much PMS. Now, PMS is often due to an imbalance of estrogen and progesterone. So really like yin and yang. With estrogen and progesterone, we want them balanced. However, with PMS, we can see this worsen when estrogen levels are high and progesterone is normal. So that's kind of option one, high estrogen, normal progesterone. We can also see PMS when estrogen is normal, but progesterone is low. Or if estrogen is high and progesterone is low, we'll see even more severe symptoms of PMS. So it's always kind of this imbalance where the scale is tilted in the direction of estrogen. So the key to improving PMS symptoms is to balance out these hormones supporting progesterone and prevent them from dropping too quickly too soon. And you'll know when, what you're trying to do is working when your hormones are balanced, you don't really have PMS symptoms, and your period comes easily and on time and without many symptoms leading up to it. And you may be thinking, that sounds impossible. I have always had really horrible periods. I can't imagine a world where it's easy. But I have worked with women who have said the same thing, and they're always amazed. Pretty quickly, within a few months, they start to feel better and they realize, oh, I actually can function month long. I don't have to have these debilitating symptoms of either anxiety or pain or breakouts or brain fog. It is possible to just feel good despite having your period. Now, let's dive into what we want to be eating during the luteal phase to support progesterone. Because the luteal phase can look so differently for everyone, I'm going to be sharing more information in this category. In the previous episodes, when we talked about the menstrual phase, the follicular phase, and the ovulatory phase, I tried to keep it really simple and streamlined so that you didn't feel overwhelmed and you really knew what to focus on. But because the luteal phase is a little more complicated, I'm going to be sharing a few different foods, but you can kind of take what you need and leave what you don't. So during the luteal phase, our metabolism actually speeds up and we require around 250 more calories each day. So if you feel like you're more hungry, don't restrict yourself and think that you need to eat exactly how you did earlier in your cycle. Now, hunger is a little bit different than cravings, though. If you're like, I am craving sugar, I need to have sugar after every single meal, then that could potentially be related to hormone imbalance. So just kind of checking in with yourself and saying, is this a true hunger? Could I kind of eat anything right now and be satisfied? Or am I having a craving where I'm kind of fixated on one specific food? Now, just like during the ovulatory phase, if you are incorporating seed cycling, you are going to want to continue to prioritize sesame and sunflower seeds. So these are going to be high in a mineral called selenium and vitamin E, which help to support progesterone production. And if you're just tuning into this episode and you've missed the past three, definitely go back and listen to those because we dive more into seed cycling and what seeds you should be incorporating into your diet during which phase of the menstrual cycle. Now, other foods to focus on during the luteal phase, one category is going to be high fiber foods. So especially if you're somebody who tends to get bloated or constipated during the PMS time period, this is going to be really important to help keep things moving. We also see higher estrogen levels with constipation because essentially that estrogen is kind of just sitting and lingering in your gut and it's being reabsorbed into your bloodstream instead of being eliminated through your stool. So if you struggle with PMS, you want to make sure you're having regular bowel movements every day. So high fiber foods are going to be things like apples, pears, beans, lentils, and brown rice. And then also making sure you're staying hydrated to help with bowel movements. If you go from a very low fiber diet to a very high fiber diet too quickly, it actually can have the opposite effect and it can worsen and cause constipation. So make sure you slowly add in those high fiber foods and you're also increasing your water intake. Now, another group of foods that's really great to focus on during the luteal phase are any foods that are high in magnesium. So this is going to help to improve PMS symptoms like headaches, cramping, insomnia, and anxiety. And magnesium is actually the most common mineral deficiency in Americans. And that's because we used to get our magnesium through our soils, but now a lot of our fruits and vegetables are depleted. So we're also going to talk about supplementation, but focusing on foods like nuts and seeds, leafy greens, avocado, dark chocolate, and bananas can all help to boost magnesium levels. Now, maybe, your PMS symptoms aren't terrible, but your goal is still to support progesterone production because you're trying to get pregnant. Then focusing on foods high in vitamin C is going to be helpful. Vitamin C is going to help to boost progesterone production. So foods like strawberries, broccoli, sweet potatoes, carrots, leafy greens, peppers. Think about those bright colored fruits and vegetables. And then lastly, this kind of goes across the board, regardless of if your concern is PMS symptoms or fertility, minimizing or eliminating alcohol and caffeine. Now, we know that alcohol can increase estrogen levels. And that's because alcohol is going to put a load on the liver, right? The liver is where we break down and detox alcohol, but it's also where we break down and detox hormones like estrogen. So if we are drinking every day, even if it's like a glass or two of wine at night, and our liver has to focus on prioritizing the alcohol, then the estrogen is going to take a back seat. So if you're somebody who struggles with symptoms of high estrogen like PMS, painful periods, heavy periods, then it's going to benefit you to reduce your alcohol intake, especially around the PMS time period. Now, with caffeine can actually cause blood vessels to dilate, leading to more bleeding and more headaches. So if you're somebody who struggles with heavy periods or PMS, it may be helpful at least that week before your period to start to cut down on the caffeine a bit. All right, so that's kind of our food section. We're thinking of high fiber foods, magnesium rich foods, vitamin C rich foods. We're including the sesame seeds and sunflower seeds. And then when we can, avoiding or at least reducing alcohol and caffeine. Now, I know I've been saying for this whole series that we're not going to dive too much into supplements, but there are two that I'm going to share with you today. So the first is vitamin B6. I love, love, love B6 for supporting PMS symptoms and supporting progesterone production. There's not really many side effects with it. B6 is actually often given to women during pregnancy as well to help with nausea. So this is something where maybe if you have mild to moderate PMS symptoms, you can take B6 every day during the second half of your cycle. So starting from day 14 on, kind of around that time that you would switch to sesame seeds and sunflower seeds. But if you have really severe PMS symptoms, then you may want to take B6 every day of your cycle, at least for a few months until you start to see improvement, and then you can switch just 2 weeks of the cycle. Now, for some people, it's hard to remember when to start taking something and stop. So sometimes it's easier to take it every day, but I'm a big proponent of, not taking something if you don't really need it, mostly because it's kind of like a waste of money at that point. So if we can save the B6 and just take it 2 weeks of your cycle and still see the improvements we're looking for, then why not do that? So B6 is number one. And like I mentioned before, magnesium is going to be the other. So specifically, magnesium glycinate is my favorite. There are different types of magnesium. And if you've ever purchased magnesium from the store, especially if you've tried Calm, which is a magnesium powdered drink, that is going to be magnesium citrate. Magnesium citrate is fantastic if you struggle with constipation. However, if you don't struggle with constipation and you take magnesium citrate, it could cause you to have loose stools or even closer to like the diarrhea range of things. So I love magnesium glycinate because it doesn't impact your digestion in that way. It's great, like I mentioned, for reducing period cramps, improving anxiety during PMS, improving sleep during PMS. Magnesium is used in over 300 reactions in the body, so it really is so important for our hormones and our fertility. And I love taking magnesium before bed because it really can help calm you down without giving you like a drowsy effect. So if you forget to take it at night and you wake up in the morning with cramps, it's okay to take it in the morning. It's not going to knock you out, but it's just kind of a nice touch before bed. All right, so let's get into exercise during the luteal phase. Because so much is changing during the luteal phase, exercise is going to look different starting at the beginning of the luteal phase versus the end of the luteal phase. And this especially is when you want to be checking in to see, okay, how do I really feel? Listening to your body and respecting that and not feeling like you have to push yourself as much as you did the week prior. So earlier in the luteal phase, right after ovulation, when hormones are still high and energy is still high, we can kind of bring over that same kind of exercise regimen we had during the ovulatory phase and take it into the beginning of the luteal phase. So that's going to look like strength training and lifting heavy weights, especially helpful if you have any sort of insulin resistance or blood sugar imbalance. This can look like long walks or more challenging hikes, maybe, especially if you're, living somewhere where it's really hot. This will be the time to go do that in those more extreme temperatures. Maybe more challenging Pilates classes or hot yoga classes. Now, as we start to move deeper into the luteal phase, later into the luteal phase, this is when you're going to start to want to move to those more gentle forms of movement. So gentle yoga, maybe easier Pilates classes, shorter walks. Not that you can't strength train during this time, but just really listening to yourself, especially if you struggle with PMS symptoms, 1 week, 10 days before your period, then for you transitioning to those lighter forms of movement is going to happen sooner versus somebody who feels really good maybe up until 2 days before their period. So not having such like a firm timeline saying, okay, the first week of my luteal phase, I have to work out like this. And the second week, I have to work out like this. No, every cycle is going to be different. So just checking in, listening to your body, and just knowing why that change is happening because your hormones are shifting and allowing your body to move in a way that still feels good without stressing yourself out. You also tend to get more tired quicker throughout the day. So trying to exercise earlier in the day can be helpful so that you don't feel like you're burning the candle at both ends and you're able to get it in. Like, I'm very honest with myself. I know pretty much regardless of where I am in my cycle, if I don't exercise before 1 p.m. in terms of like Pilates, there's a very, 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 very low chance it's going to happen. Occasionally it does, but I just know I am a morning person. Long walks in the afternoon, no problem. But those days where I try to trick myself and tell myself I'm going to go to an afternoon or an evening Pilates class, it never happens. So just checking with yourself too, knowing when do you have the most energy. Now, if you're somebody who is really dragging in the morning, but gets that burst of energy around 5 p.m., then use that and go do your exercise classes at that time. Really, the luteal phase is typically when women struggle the most. So if you are new to cycle syncing and you're overwhelmed with where to start, it just seems like a lot to have to focus on every phase, constantly. I would recommend focusing on the luteal phase first. And then once you really feel like you have that dialed in, then you can start to move on to the other phases. All right, that wraps up our cycle syncing series. I hope this has been helpful and just giving you some ideas on how you can start feeling your best and connecting with your body throughout the month. Now, as we head into May, we will be talking all about PCOS and pregnancy. That's my specialty. I am also really excited to welcome a few of the women I have been fortunate enough to work with. They are going to be sharing their PCOS story with you. I'm hoping in doing so, they will provide some inspiration for any of you who might be feeling stuck or hopeless when it comes to feeling good with PCOS and getting pregnant. None of their stories are alike. Their goals when they first came to me were different. Their history with PCOS was different and their outcomes are different. So I know the different stories are going to resonate with you in different ways. And then one final reminder, I am choosing one person in May to win either a virtual one-on-one consult or a swag bag with my favorite products based on the giveaway that's happening this month. So if you choose the one-on-one consult, we are going to be going over your health goals over Zoom, and we will come up with a plan to help you get there. And then if you choose a swag bag, I'll be including some of my favorite wellness products, including supplements, skincare, and more. So make sure if you haven't already entered the giveaway, you leave a review for the podcast and you just share the podcast on Instagram and tag me so I can see it. And, thank you so much again for joining me today. I really appreciate all of your support. I see your messages. I am really glad this seems to be resonating and helping so many of you. So please continue to share with your sister, your friends. You never know what episode is going to stand out to them, and it really could change their life. It could be a matter of them getting a diagnosis and figuring out why they don't feel their best. So I will see you later this week for our Friday Chats episode. Have a wonderful rest of your day.